I now have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. Our next speaker is Chandran Sankaran, and he's the founder of the Gigafact project. So I remember the last speech that Chandran made, which was at an Indiaspora event at our annual forum in Austin. And it was on the Sunday morning, Chandran, of the forum. And I remember the rapt attention that you got on your speech because it was such an interesting topic, which is very apt for today as well. And Chandran is going to talk about AI, journalism, and misinformation. So, Chandran, over to you.
While it's coming up, good afternoon. After a couple of decades as a software entrepreneur, I turned and faced the struggling and broken news and journalism industry. It's a thing that I had a lot of, I think, personal dismay around over the years. And amongst other things, about 18 months ago, I started up a nonprofit called Gigafact. And what Gigafact does is that we go find local, regional, really high quality newsrooms that have extreme transparency and nonpartisanship. And then we invite them and empower them and enable them to start responding to claims and untethered claims online. So essentially, we connect the dots between these great local sources and these kind of confused consumer conversations that are happening online. We are currently present in 7 states in the United States, and we hope to be at 20 by the end of this year, in a super important year for elections and democracy in general. Over the last 6 months, we built an AI workbench that we have deployed and piloted at one of our newsrooms, and we hope to roll it out across the network, that essentially assists them in rapidly responding to claims. So they can ask it a question that says, is this claim true or false? It kind of get me really good sources, and it creates the first draft of a response to that question. So I have some real frontline experience with a very rapidly moving space, and so we can reflect a little bit about all of that. So in order to understand, though, kind of the impact of AI on this ecosystem, rather fragile and distressed ecosystem of news and journalism, I think it's really important to understand how the news industry works today. And it's quite a far cry from kind of the world of 20 or 25 years ago. And then we can kind of look at the impact of AI on this space. So I think we're going to cover a lot of ground in a few minutes here. But a way to think about the news industry is if I said, there are 8,000 people in the room here today, right? We can look around, we can make an observation, we have a quick sense of intuition that says that's just not true, right? But if I said this to someone in Texas, they just wouldn't know if it's true or not, right? So we kind of are very good at forming intuitions and understanding when we can see the data, we can touch it, and we can form an intuition about it. But the way the news industry works is that we outsource the observation and the conclusion formation to an entire industry that we trust is doing this work on our behalf for the large, complicated world that we can't see every day, right? So let's take a central claim and a contention in the world of wind turbines and wind turbines kill lots of birds, okay? And in order to answer this question, I don't know how many of us have actually gone to the base of a wind turbine to see if, in fact, there are birds at the bottom of each wind turbine. But we outsource the job to someone to go figure out if this is, in fact, true or not. And the way this works is that there's a happening in the world, which is wind turbines killing birds. Somebody's got to go to the base of enough of these wind turbines and count the birds, right? Then they've got to extrapolate. They think they've counted for 5%, and they've got to extrapolate to 100%. And those are the reporters, right? And then someone takes that data and says, Here's why it really doesn't support a wind alternative energy policy. And someone makes the opposite argument. And they're the explainers and the analyzers, right? And then it gets delivered to us in whatever form, whether it's a New York Times app or whether it's a Google search, right? It gets delivered to us. But kind of this is the outsourced supply chain of information and news, right? By the way, the answer to the question, are there lots and lots of birds killed by wind turbines? The answer is yes. It's approximately 1/200th of the number of birds that get killed by buildings. Birds that kind of crash into buildings is about 200 times larger than wind turbines. And it's the biggest offender of killing birds is what? Cats. 2,000 times more than all the wind turbines in the world are cats. Okay. So, and so the same is true, by the way, if you said, did 30,000 Chinese come across the border from Mexico in 2023 because they flew from China and then kind of used the southern border as a way to enter the United States? Answer is yes. Yes, by the way, right? But we outsource this kind of journey, right, to a news industry, and we trust that this kind of supply chain is working well. And I think everything changed. I think we've got an old presentation up here, but I'll make do with it. I don't think this is the latest version. If you have the latest version of the presentation, you can pull it up. But we'll make do with this. Okay. So what happened was the delivery side, which is the end here, got taken over electronically, right, with Google and Facebook and so on. And two things happened when they did that. Number one, they took 95% of the entire money that was funding the supply chain. 95% of all the money that was going into this business of reporting on the dead birds to producing their reports and and delivering it got concentrated in one end of the supply chain, leaving the rest of the supply chain with only 5% and a highly starved supply chain, right? The second thing that happened is that the delivery models here is kind of fast food for the mind, right? So imagine that your only food supply is either McDonald's or Wendy's or name your fast food restaurant, and literally that's the only choice you have, and the entire supply chain behind it now is geared up to deliver what your delivery platforms offer, which is content that favors cognitive addiction and engagement without any indexing towards reality and factuality, right? So now have an entire supply chain that's kind of starved, existentially trying to kind of figure out how they're going to survive, all of them behaving, therefore, the way people behave when your existence is threatened, which is you start doing the thing that kind of allows you to survive. You start making stuff up. You create headlines that are clickbaity in order to kind of engage the downstream audiences and get that kind of function according to kind of the current delivery model. Thank you. Thanks for switching it. Right, and what that did, right, was on the reporting side, literally, we have news deserts all over the United States, all over the world, because there is no way for someone to do the hard work of going and checking whether people have crossed the border or kind of counting the birds at the winter. So they don't, so the work just doesn't get done, right? So what does the rest of the supply chain do? It makes stuff up because it's in the absence of data on the extreme left side. So the good supply is starved and is kind of struggling for existence. And in the middle, we have an explosion of Substacks and YouTube channels and podcasts who are explainers, who are kind of explaining how the world works based on the limited data that they have. Some of them are amazing, and some of them are not so amazing, right? And kind of this is the world, and it used to be like a full stack journalism thing. The Tribune Tower in Chicago, or the LA Times Tower was a full stack thing that worked all the way across. And essentially, this thing has completely fragmented the supply chain and starved the actual kind of core of the supply chain. So now let's add AI to this mix. Okay. What AI does is it can't do anything to track the number of birds under the wind turbine. That needs to be done by human beings, right? But the moment the data enters electronically, what AI now is capable of doing is digesting all of that and delivering a experience directly to consumers that, by the way, I think it's pretty amazing and I think it's pretty good. And yes, it's flawed, but in the last 6 months, I think the kind of, we achieved something like a 99 point something% rate on the AI workbench, actually accurately predicting the answer to these claims and writing amazing 150-word summaries. So I'm really excited and bullish about kind of what's happening from an AI perspective, but it's reliant on the data, the primary firsthand data that enters the supply chain. And as a result of this, AI entering one of the last remaining revenue streams for firsthand news reporters was search referrals by Google. And that's going to disappear because people are not going to be clicking on news links anymore, right? They're going to see an AI response, and they're not going to go in and say, let me read the content from this side or that side. So an already threatened revenue stream is disappearing further, okay? And as if that weren't enough, so this is AI for social good, right? So imagine if this was AI for social bad here. We have the promise of an explosion of synthetic news. So New York Times had a fantastic story about 3 months ago where they showed you 10, it was a quiz, they showed you 10 faces and they asked you to take the quiz to say, can you identify which is a real person, which is a synthetically generated face? And I got 3 out of 10 right because I was trying. If I just guessed, randomly, I would have gotten 5 out of 10, but it really is super hard, right? There's no human intuition for figuring this stuff out. There are early efforts on identifying synthetic content in terms of synthetic content detection. There are 2 or 3 firms that I know that have been venture funded. I saw the results of one of them about 4 weeks ago, and they've got about an 85% rate in recognizing images, synthetically generated images of certain kind of public officials. But this is going to be a moving target. It's like virus and antivirus, right? Detente, right? But that work has begun. We'll see how far it gets. And the second thing that's kind of interesting in this space is that one of the earlier speakers referred to Adobe and some of the work that's happening around content authenticity. So imagine that if you have a camera or your phone and you take a picture and the picture that you as a human take gets a digital watermark. It's not really that, but let me simplify it to that. That then is attached to the image. So whenever it's shared downstream, people can always know that it came from a real live human photograph as opposed to being synthetically generated, right? So it's a dual strategy to kind of attack this problem. One is detection, the other is provenance marking in this space, and we can talk more about that. So I'm going to just kind of wrap up here and just say we're kind of covering a lot of ground. And I'm going to say there are 4 things that I would love for you all, if you're interested, to do something about. And you have my email at the bottom of the slide here, and I'm happy to be a resource to kind of connect you with opportunity. Number 1, find a local news room in your area and support the heck out of them, okay? And local can be regional, local can be on a subject area you care about. I had dinner 3 nights ago with a newsroom called Air Wars that counts civilian casualties in Syria and Gaza. And you're right, how do you know that 30,000 people are dead in Gaza? How do we know that, right? It's someone on the ground kind of doing this work. So find local firsthand news gatherers who are doing this work, and I'm happy to be a resource and point you to people and support them with philanthropy. It's needed for the next 24 to 36 months while this world gets sorted out. The second is AI needs to pay for this content. My view is that there needs to be a Spotify-style kind of brokerage model that essentially, qualifies really good content, sells it to AI models, and returns 80% back to the news sources. Happy to brainstorm this with anyone who's interested in launching a brokerage model. The third thing is that I think synthetic content detection has gotten something like $20 to $30 million of venture capital, and it needs to be about $2 billion. And so let's find opportunities to do that and really kind of place a bet on this, because cracking the code on this is kind of great for business, it's great for humanity, right? This is at the core of everything. And then number four, I think the time has come for serious regulation of social media platforms. And the great news here is that there are 2 or 3 really fantastic new angles that are emerging that gets out of the kind of free speech conundrum and all the reasons why you can't touch social media platforms. And if anyone's really interested in the regulation of social media and so on, in order to without an iota kind of infringing on any speech capabilities, to kind of make it a safer environment for consumers who are defaulting into kind of that being the principal source of information for them. More than 50% of the United States, especially young Americans, consume their principal news source is social media. So there's lots to talk about. So here we go. So I think we're on time. Do we have a minute? Okay. So any questions? Yeah. So this is a 3-hour discussion over a scotch. Okay. But the 30-second answer to that is that think of it as design changes. So a simple example of it, not necessarily that this is the thing that's going to happen, right? Is so if you add a 3-second delay to the like button, there are enough lab experiments to show that virality goes down dramatically. Okay, so that has nothing to do with speech, right? But there are a set of kind of questions on the table like that, and there are 3 important consumer groups: children, seniors, and veterans, who every state, red or blue, is super interested in protecting. And the third thing is states have rights that are super interesting. EU has rights that are super interesting, and all of this kind of creates a regulatory framework. But I mean, that's the short answer to that.
So I work at VaynerMedia, and in terms of like platform search engine optimization, right? We know that like roughly 70% of Gen Z uses TikTok as a search engine more than Google. And so what are your thoughts on somewhat creating controls around not just platform search engine optimization or Google search engine optimization, but also like now the additional layer of generative search ranking on top of all of that, and how to filter out, negative or I guess the lack of truth?
Yeah. So I would say, honestly, I haven't thought enough about that question to give a fair answer to it. But what I would love is a working group that kind of considers these sorts of things. And I honestly couldn't give you a kind of a sensible response to that question.
Hi, not a journalist, so pardon the question. But the truth of human language is, even if I say something, you understand it differently. That's the complexity. And the fact that there's so many PR spins and the same truth can be presented for political reasons in 10 different ways, is there anything AI can do that, in a way, bridges that gap? Other than fact checking, is there more about the amount of spins and angles and politicization that AI can help with?
Yeah. So I'll just tell you my kind of bias on this kind of genre of thinking is that I think AI can do amazing things if we get our shit together. Okay. And I think so a little bit we are in an environment where it's like people coming onto the freeway with not a single lane marking and not a single sign telling you whether there's an on-ramp or an off-ramp. And I think the distance, and if we took all those signs off the freeway, I think we'd have total and utter chaos that's gamed for kind of political gain, right? That's what we'd have. And I think that's the world we live in this kind of information supply chain right now. And I think we need to kind of create some basic order that allows AI to kind of sit in a couple of lanes that don't really exist. So I think there's an amazing set of opportunities for AI. but I feel like it's too fragile an underlying ecosystem because right now it's just going to add to the chaos. And I think that's why I'm kind of like raising these four things as things we need to urgently do so that A, we can get to a healthier place with or without AI, and B, we can actually deploy AI in ways that are equitable and democratic and useful, and and I think we just lack the so it's a bit like adding a big thing on top of bamboo scaffolding, and I think we kind of need to do better from an infrastructure perspective. So thank you.